everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for my September reading wrap-up. Okay, so in this video I am going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of September. At the end I will talk about some of the stats to do with favourite books, genres, all of that sort of thing. So if you are particularly interested in stats, all of the timestamps and all of the different books will be below in the description, so you can obviously go jump around as much as you want, etc. First of all, let's talk about the two readathons that I did in the month of September. The first readathon that I took part in was Becca's Bookoplathon. This is a month-long readathon that is hosted by Becca from Becca and the Books. I will link her channel in the description below, as well as anyone else that I talk about in this video will always be linked in the description below. So you can go and check them out, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. If they don't have a channel, but they have an Instagram or a Twitter or whatever, I will link that information below as well. Yes, so I took part in Becca's Bookoplathon. So this is a readathon that is basically us playing Becca's TBR game, which is a TBR game based on Monopoly, except that it's all about reading books. I will just show you the board that we got for this round. I stuck it into my journal. So this is my spread for the month. For roll number 1, I got published / set in 1999 or before. And so for this one, I was going to read Postmortom by Patricia Cornwell. I did read that one. Then roll number 2, I got favourite genre, and for this I actually put down both Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson and Fire by Kristen Cashore, because those were the reads that I had to read for my read-along of the Graceling series with Bethany and Cara, and then Vespertine was my last read book club book. So that's the book club that I run with Ellie and Lana. Then and that's fantasy, is my favourite genre. Then roll number 3, I got Features of Death, and for this one I chose The Whisper Man by Alex North, and I did read that one. Sorry, I forgot to say I did also read Vespertine and Fire. For roll number 4, I got Multi-Perspective, which I chose the Before the Devil Breaks You by Liberal Bray, which is the 3rd book in the Diviners series. But unfortunately, my parents couldn't actually find that, so I couldn't borrow it off them. I obviously could have borrowed it from the library or whatever, but I just didn't get around to doing that, so I didn't read that one. Then for roll number 5, I got Chance, and for this one, I just ended up picking the book Cytonic from the chance card, so that was pretty cool. And then for roll, which I did read, and then for roll number 6, I got to Go, which was the space randomise your TBR. So I did that using my owned TBR shelf on Goodreads, and I got Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. I didn't read that one. I started it, but I've just not been in a non-fiction space lately, so anyway, I didn't finish it, but I did read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the books on that TBR. And the Make Me Read readathon was hosted by Ellie from Earl Grey Books, Paige from Pages with Paige, and Helen from Helen's Bookhaven. And the idea was basically that you set up polls on Instagram or Twitter or on your community tab or wherever, and then people voted for what you should read. So it was the last 2 weeks of the month, and I put up 4 polls. So I put up a poll for the book club read or read along read, and that was Vespertine versus Fire, and Fire won. And then I put a poll for books to read for self-destructing books, so the books from my books will just self-destruct in 1 year. If I don't read them, I have to unhaul them, which I will link below as well. So I put 3 books from that, and the one that won was The Secrets We Kept, but I didn't read that one, unfortunately. Then I had some crime, because I had 2 sort of thriller crime books in my Bookoplathon TBR. The one that won was Whisper Man, so I read that one in those 2 weeks. I did read that one. And then I had some Alice Oseman books, because I'm doing an Alice Oseman vlog, so I'm trying to read a bunch of books by them. And the one that ended up just slightly winning was Radio Silence, and I am about 3/4 of the way through that one, so unfortunately it won't be included in this wrap up, but I am reading it. So that's all of the readathon information. Let's go through now and talk about the books that I read. I usually do this in the order in which I read books, so it's not correlated according to likes, etc. It's just what order I ended up finishing them in. So, book number 1. The first book that I read in the month of September was Postmortom by Patricia Cornwell. This is an adult thriller. I can't even remember what it was about. This was fine. It was kind of middle of the road thriller, mystery, police procedural. I gave it 5.86 in Corpa, which is a 3.5 stars. So I enjoyed it well enough. I had a good time reading it. It was very readable and very easy to read, but yeah, it wasn't particularly memorable, as you can tell from the fact that I really don't even remember what it was about in particular. But on the back, it says, a serial killer is on the loose in Richmond, Virginia. 3 women have died, brutalized and strangled in their own bedrooms. There is no pattern. The killer appears to strike at random, but always early on Saturday mornings. So when Dr. Kay Scarpetta, Chief Medical Officer, is awakened at 2:33 a.m., she knows the news is bad. There is a 4th victim, and she fears many others will follow unless she can dig up new forensic evidence to aid the police. Like I said, it was kind of just a standard police procedural type of book. The main character is a medical officer, so there was quite a bit of conversation about doing autopsies and different things like that. Perfectly finely written, perfectly fine characters, perfectly fine, but I'm probably not going to keep it because I don't know if I'd go back to it, but I'm glad I read it. So yeah, that was my first book. The second book that I finished in the month of September was Cytonic by Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in this particular series. I think the series, Skywood. Book 3. So this is the 3rd book in that series. We follow Spencer. Spencer is a young adult. I think she's meant to be like 16 or 17, part pilot, and I don't want to give too much away, so I don't want to really go into too much of the details, but it is set in space and it is about some mysteries of the universe. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it an 8.14 on Corpile, which is 4.5 stars. Like I said, there's some really interesting conversations around the nature of the universe, around the nature of reality, around what is out there and what is, I guess, normal. So we have a bunch of different aliens with a variety of different anatomies, and that affects their way of perceiving the world and their way of approaching the universe. In this one, we are talking about the nature of time as well, and the idea of memory and what makes a memory and how important is memory to our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of our personality. I do think there's a lot in these books. In particular, I found this one to be very kind of philosophical in a lot of ways and just really, really interesting. I really enjoy Sanderson's writing style in these young adult sci-fi books. So I didn't say this is a young adult sci-fi. And I think that he explores some really interesting topics, like I said. I just want to say as well that it had been a while since I read either Skyward or Starsight. And so I actually used a website called Recaptions, which is actually run by a fellow booktuber, Amber from Reads with Amber, I think is the channel name. It will be in the description below. And yeah, I found that really, really helpful. So if you are wanting to pick up a book and it's been a while since you've read other books in the series and you want to recap, I suggest that you go and see if there's one on Recaptions. Anyway, that was Cytonic. So throughout September, I did veer a little bit off course with my TBR. So as you heard at the beginning, there were a few on both my Bookathon and my Make Me Read TBRs that I didn't quite get to. Part of the reason for that is because I did read 2 books that weren't on any TBRs that I just was in the mood to read. So the first of these is the book that I next read, which was Dear Mrs. Bird by AJ Pearce. I buddy read this with my friend Michelle, and I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed this one. It is really easy to read, but there's a lot of stuff in here. So this is actually historical fiction, and we follow a young woman called Emmeline, or she's in her mid-20s, I think. And it's the Second World War. It's in London during the Blitz, and Emmeline wants to be a reporter or a journalist, and so she goes for this interview believing that she is going to interview to be a journalist for this really important newspaper, but it turns out that she actually interviewed to be a columnist. But she goes along with it anyway because the company that owns the magazine that she will be a columnist for also owns one of the biggest newspapers in London. Unfortunately, what she didn't realise when she interviewed was that she's not actually going to be the columnist, she's going to be the assistant to the columnist, which she's not super keen on, but she decides to continue with it, and Mrs. Bird is the columnist. Mrs. Bird gets letters and answers those letters, but she has a whole list of things that she deems unworthy or inappropriate to put in the newspaper and to answer the letters, and Emmeline is responsible for reading the letters and deciding which ones should go to Mrs. Bird. She feels really sorry for all the people, and most of the letters aren't included or aren't answered. She feels really sorry for them because there are genuine issues, so she starts writing back. So that's going on, but in the other part of the story is that, like I said, it's in the Blitz. She is working for the fire brigade. She is answering phones and then sending the fire brigade out to deal with various different fires. And obviously in the middle of the Blitz, there'd be lots of situations where they would be needed to put out fires and also to assist generally within London. It's a really interesting book because it's really light-hearted and fun to read, but at the same time, there's all this really harsh, harrowing stuff going on. So even though it's really light-hearted in the way that she approaches things, the way she talks about things, there's still a lot happening, and she grows up quite a bit during the novel. I actually heard a couple of people talk about this recently, and having read it and not thinking it was amazing. I didn't think it was amazing, but I did actually really enjoy it. And I feel like I possibly enjoyed it more than some of those other people, but you know, that's the way it goes. On Core Pile, I gave this one 8.86. That's actually a 4.5 rating, so star rating. So yeah, obviously I really enjoyed it. I just found it a really, really easy writing style, just really fun, and I like the way that it was a really fun approach to actually a very serious topic. So yeah. Next up, we have the last to read book club pick for September, which was Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. This is actually my second book by Margaret Rogerson, and I think I preferred it to the first one that I read, which was Sorcery of Thorns, but I really enjoyed Sorcery of Thorns as well, and I really, really enjoyed this one. I really like Margaret Rogerson's writing style. I think that she is very good at those descriptive but not overly flowery purple prose, which I actually really, really like. I mean, I do love lyrical purple writing, as you know, but I do really like a good description that isn't super flowery at the same time, which I think Margaret Rogerson does really, really well. So in this book, we follow a young woman whose name is Artemisia, and she lives in this world where some hundreds of years ago, sort of something happened, and the sort of veil, I guess, between the dead and not dead broke, lifted, what have you, and there are spirits around in the world, and there are these nuns and priests who are in charge of keeping control of the spirits and making sure that they don't possess people and wreak havoc around the world. Artemisia is a nun, and I think it's young adult fantasy, so I think that she is supposed to be like 17 or 18 again, and one day something fairly major happens and the dead rise. There's lots of terrible things happening. I'm really not describing this very well. Let me read the book the back of the book to you. The dead of L'Oreal do not rest. Artemisia is training to be a Grey Sister, tasked with cleansing the bodies of the dead so that their souls can pass on. Otherwise, they will rise as spirits with a hunger for the living. When her convent is attacked, Artemisia defends it by awakening a revenant. Wielding this ancient spirit's extraordinary power almost consumes her, but only a Vespertine, a priestess trained to wield a revenant, has any chance of saving L'Oreal. As Artemisia unravels the sinister mystery of saints, secrets, and dark magic, her bond with the Revenant grows, and when a hidden evil begins to surface, she discovers that facing this enemy may require her to betray everything she's been taught to believe, if the Revenant doesn't betray her first. So, yeah. That's a better description than I was giving. Like I said, I really like her writing style. I really thought that she came up with quite an interesting, quite an original take on fantasy. Yeah, I just thought it was really, really interesting. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Sabriel and that series by Garth Nix. I love the character of Artemisia. I thought that she was really, really well written, and I just found it really interesting and readable, and yeah. So in core pile, I gave this one 8.29, which is a 4.5 stars as well. The next book that I read was The Whisper Man by Alex North. This is an adult thriller. We follow a few different characters. Sorry, I'm trying to hold my journal. I might just pop it there. There we go. But the main characters that we follow are Tom and his son Jacob. I think it's Jacob. Jake, and then a police officer whose name I have completely forgotten. So many years before this story took place, a bunch of different boys were kidnapped and tortured and killed, and the older police officer, one of the main characters, was in charge of that case. He gets called in many years later because there is a boy gone missing. One of the things that the mother says is that the boy heard someone whispering, and one of the things with the older case that was very well known was that the man was apparently whispering to his victims before he kidnapped them. And then we have Tom and Jake. They move to this town where all this is happening, and they kind of get embroiled in this scenario, and yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on. I really, really enjoyed this one. I thought that it was very suspenseful. I thought that it was really well written. I thought that the author wrote like I said, very suspenseful, lots of twists and turns, lots of things that you didn't see coming. It was quite a slow burn of a thriller, but I did really enjoy the way that created the suspense. I thought that the suspense was created really, really successfully. I really enjoyed the young boy character. I thought that was done really, really well, and the relationship between the boy and his father, which was very fraught due to death in the family and all sorts of other things like that. I thought that was done really well, and that exploration of familial relationships throughout this book was done really, really well. But like I said, it was also really suspenseful, and the mystery thriller aspect of it worked really well as well. It was quite creepy also, which I know some sort of more police procedural mystery type thrillers aren't necessarily always that creepy, but some of the twists were quite creepy, and the overall thing that was happening with the children that were being kidnapped was very, very creepy. So overall, I did think this was really well done, and I did really, really enjoy it. Quite a quick read as well. In core pile, I gave this one a 7.71, which is 4 stars. The next book that I read was also not on any of the TBRs, but it came out sometime in September, earlier September, and I picked it up and I really wanted to read it, so I did. And that is Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston. This is the second book in this series. I don't actually know what the series is called. The first one was Amari and the Night Brothers, which I read last year and absolutely loved so much, and so I grabbed Amari and the Great Game as soon as I could and read it as soon as I could. This is a middle grade fantasy. It is quite reminiscent of Nevermore. Yes, it is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend, and in a lot of ways Harry Potter. I personally think it's a lot better than Harry Potter, and really, really fun. I had a great time with this one. So in this book we follow Amari Peters. Amari discovers in the first book that supernatural things are real, and that there is a Bureau of Supernatural Affairs who is in charge of everything about the supernatural world. And Amari auditions, tries out to become a junior agent, which is one of the people that work for the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. So there's lots of magic, there's lots of kind of kids using magic and solving mysteries and trying to fix things and, you know, all of that sort of thing. So like I said, very reminiscent of Nevermore. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. It was fantastically written. I really love Amari's character. I really like the way that B.B. Alston uses this Bureau of Supernatural Affairs to discuss racism and different forms of oppression, which is really, really interesting and really well done. And yeah, just a really, really fun, really, really great book. Really enjoyed this one, as you would expect. So I gave this one a 9.14 on Cornwell, which is 5 stars. The final book that I read in the month of September was Fire by Kristen Cashore. This is the second book in the Graceling Realm series by Kristen Cashore. This one is actually quite different to Graceling. So in Graceling, we follow Katza, and Katza is a Graceling. People who are graced are people who have incredible supernatural type powers of one particular thing. So they might be absolutely amazing painters, or they might be absolutely phenomenal fighters or archers or something like that. This book takes place in another world that is sort of adjacent to the world of Graceling, and we follow the main character Fire. Now in this world there are monsters, and monsters are a kind of extraordinary version of whatever type of thing they are. Fire is the last human monster. Monsters have like amazingly unusual coloured like fur. So if there's a monster rabbit, it might have bright pink fur or something like that. And they are particularly quite vicious actually, and they're known to be quite vicious and quite nasty generally. Fire is not, but Fire is kind of trying to fight some things that are considered to be inherent about monsters. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of a lot slower though than it sounds. Quite a slow story. It's very character driven. It's a romance as well. I really enjoyed this one. I found it really interesting. I have actually read this one before and I didn't like it as much as the others first time around. I feel like I enjoyed it a lot more this time around than I did before. I mean, I still liked it last time, but I feel like I got a lot more out of it this time. So it really is, like I said, a character study of this woman Fire. But it's also really just an exploration of women and the way women are treated and the expectation that people can't control how they respond to women. So the idea of monsters is that they are, you are attracted to them, you can't help it, you have no control over yourself. It's just this kind of magical effect that they have on people, and people react in different ways because of that. So some people become completely obsessed with being their best friend. Some people want to marry them, fancy themselves in love with them, and then some people want to assault them and be violent. But yeah, I find it really interesting. I thought, like I said, it was a really interesting conversation around those things that are always said, you know, that she was asking for it or what have you. So definitely enjoyed this one. Definitely thought the conversation was really interesting, really well written. Definitely, I think, an important conversation to have and done in a really great way. The relationship that happens in this book, very slow burn as well, and I thought that it was done really well because you see this relationship that grows with a growing understanding of each other and what the other person's actually like and what the other person actually believes and feels. So I thought that was really interesting as well, and a really interesting look at dynamics of humanity and people and interactions and the assumptions that we can make and how wrong they can be, and yeah. So I gave this one a 8.71, which is 4.5 stars. The final book that I want to talk about today, which I actually read earlier in the month, that is Galetea, or Galetea, I'm not sure how you say it, but this one by Madeline Miller. So this is a short story. It is really, really short, including the author's note. It is 56 pages long. So it took me about an hour and a half maybe to read this book. I read it all in one sitting and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It follows the story of Galetea, or Galetea, who is a woman who was originally carved from marble into a statue, and then the carver fancied himself to be in love with his statue, and so he asked the goddess, I'm assuming it was Venus, to turn his statue, Galetea, into an actual woman. But because he made her, he considers that he has total control over her, but then she starts behaving like a person and not an object, and he doesn't like that. So this book, we open in with her being in a kind of asylum, mental institution. It's set in ancient Greece, although it's not very clear that, so it could be modern times. And it follows Galetea, and it follows her, it's from her perspective, and she's talking about the fact that she's in this institution and why, and the relationship she had with her husband and her daughter that they had, and what he expected of her versus what she wanted to give, and how she wanted to behave. It is amazing what was in this book, given that it's so incredibly short. I feel like Madeline Miller just packed so much in there. So this book deals with misogyny, it deals with relationships between men and women, it deals with feminism, it deals with the fetishization of women's bodies, it deals with power and control, and yeah, there's so much going on in this book, which just astounds me. And the fact that I loved it so much when, like I keep saying, it was 56 pages long, including the author's notes. So the actual story is like 40 something pages long. And I'm not a huge short story reader, as you guys know, but this was just amazing. I absolutely adored it. Love Madeline Miller's writing style. I love the way that she expresses things and the pictures that she paints, and just, yeah, absolutely incredible, absolutely stunning, also a stunning book. This one I gave a 9.43, which was 5 stars as well. So yeah, absolutely astounding and highly recommend. So that's everything that I had to talk to you about today, except for the stats, which I'll do quite briefly. So throughout the month of September, I read 8 books, which came to a total number of pages of 2,698. I've done average rating, I've done a core pile average rating, and then a star average rating. So on core pile, my average rating was 7.99 out of 10, which was, out of 5 stars, was a 4.44. So my genre breakdown for the month, I read 2 thrillers, 3 fantasy, 1 sci-fi, 1 historical fiction, and 1 myth retelling. My category breakdown, I read 4 adult books, 3 young adult, and 1 middle grade. My favourite book of the month was Galetea, and my least favourite book of the month was Postmortom. I had a really, really great reading month, I think. 2 5 stars and a lot of 4 and 4.5 stars, so I think that is an amazing reading month. That's it from me today. How was your reading month? Please comment below and let me know how you went, what was your favourite book, what was your least favourite book, how many books did you read, anything else that you want to comment below, please do so. If you would like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me a fire emoji, because a lot of the books that I have here have kind of gold foiling, and then we have the book called Fire. So leave me a fire emoji if you would like to leave me a comment but you don't know what. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.